Okay. We're now the third of our three slides, our three recordings. But I need to issue a warning here. There's a very bad visual pun approaching. Your project was to get yourself to a tropical island away from the hurly-burly, and your earliest time you could start the holiday depended on how soon you could finish the work you had to do. So you were shortening the time it was taking to do all your tasks so you could have a really, really early start. And you can imagine yourself sitting on the beach in a hammock, because what you were doing was thinking about a hammock activity, which is an activity that spans over the segments of a project. The duration is determined after the network plan is drawn, and hammock activities are often used to aggregate sections of the project to facilitate getting the right amount of detail for specific sections. In other words, you start to group things together, hold them all together, and stretch them between two significant activities. And here's a good example. In item G, we have activities that can happen, B, D, and F. These are all in together. So basically what we've got is we've got activities we can run together, and that means this activity here can happen all around these. This is activity G. It can hang between the activities. You can group them all together. Some more discussion about this in the text, which is actually quite useful. So let's now have a look and see what we've covered so far. We talked about building a project network, working from left to right using standard terminology. We talked about using the correct terminology: activities, activity on node, early start, early finish, duration. And we looked at some basic rules for developing a project network. And then we start to look at the fundamentals of activity on node as the way we draw our activity diagrams. And we use that when we look at the case in class of HMS Pinafore. We look at the developing a forward pass, backwards pass, how soon can we finish, how late can we start, where you get slack and where you get lag times. If you're trying to condense a project down, you start to look at the slack. Some things you can't change, like lag. Lags are generally agreed to be outside of your control as a project manager. But this is where you start to exercise your ability as a contract negotiator, or building on the relationships with external third parties to your project to reduce lags as much as possible, which means you can recast your project. So you might say, well, if only we can get 60% of what we need delivered 20% earlier, that frees up a considerable amount of lag time, which means we can start our project earlier. We have an early start. Or the latest we can start is here, and that is contingent on reducing the lags and the slacks in the project. So if we are delayed by rain or weather or lack of skilled people, then the latest we can start might be 5 days after our plan. But that means every other step in the project, every activity, either has to be reduced or run in parallel. And then we have the hammock activities, which are activities that go between them, which you put a lot of other activities that just keep them in one place, and you watch as they go. Now, but the thing I guess to remember here is that nearly all of these activities now are built into project management software. So you possibly won't have to do these calculations, but you need to understand the principles of it, and your task as a project manager may well be to make considered decisions like, can we ask our project team to reduce all slack by 10%? Or if we have to condense a project down to finish much earlier, what can we do? Is there any slack in the project? What are the lags that we can change? What's the earliest we can start? How can we change the duration of key activities of our project? What activities are sitting in a hammock that we can pull off and start early? So this is where you need to start making decisions about the activities, which comes back to the task of the project manager. Project manager is essentially someone who looks after planning, organising, leadership, making decisions, and managing control on the project. That's all we have in this section. There's quite a bit of material in Chapter 6. We will apply this in our class. Do go back and look at the text. The text explains this much more effectively than I can. It has some up-to-date examples, and we will do some exercises in class around this. And I have put a couple of exercises up on iLearn for you to do, and the solutions will be available on Monday afternoon. Thank you very much.